Hi everybody, welcome to the next episode of Life-Changing Conversations. As you know, I'm Neil Shah, and today I'm with two amazing, wonderful, incredible people that I've had a chance to get to know relatively well when I did their workshop not so long ago. I'm here with Gina Holland and Debbie Beauchamp, who are co-directors of Celebration of Being. They have an incredible program, do some incredible work, but we'll get to that later. Before we even start talking about that, let's find out who they are, what they're about, and what got them here, and what is their life-changing story. So this is all about life lessons and self-discoveries. Let's find out Gina's and Debbie's life-changing lessons and discoveries. So welcome Debbie, welcome Gina. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you for such an amazing introduction.
Well, no, thank you so much for taking the time out to come and have a chat with me. So, tell me firstly, who are you? I'm sure all of our viewers and listeners are really interested in finding out more about who you are. Who's Debbie and who's Gina?
I'm Gina.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and obviously I'm Debbie there.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself. What's your journey that's led you here to be sat in this seat talking to me?
So just checking in where to start, because the story's important and it also gets kind of stale over time, so I just want to really bring some aliveness and presence to that. So for me, my life-changing story was one really of a lack of presence and a lack of somebody there. And that was the doorway for me, and that was what opened a doorway for me to really explore and come back to myself and come home to myself. So my story was that I was married young. I had 4 children rapidly in succession. After 10 years of marriage, my relationship started to break down, and it really, really took me by surprise. I chose a man that would not leave me, would not betray me, that was not going to leave my side. I didn't know then, but my insecurities was that I'd been left and I'd been betrayed and I'd been abandoned. So my kind of radar was that I'm going to choose a really safe man, and I did. And I married him and I had 4 children. And it was a very superficial, materialistic, unconscious life. And I was numb to that. I was just kind of going through the motions, raising the children. We was publicans in the East End. We had pubs and businesses. And then there was a betrayal in the marriage. The world came crashing down, basically. I felt betrayed and let down and disappointed, and I had never had the internal resources to cope with that. So what I did is I just literally flayed about for many years, enraged, furious. My children all got affected by that. They was all caught in the crossfire. My understanding was that if my husband hadn't have done what he did, I wouldn't be feeling like I felt. So that was as far as I got with any emotional understanding, and he took the brunt of that. And it was a horrendous time for us, and the most challenging part for me was that I didn't have anybody there. There was nobody there that I could trust enough to really go there with what I was feeling. So eventually we split up. He went back to live with his mum. I was raising 4 children. We went bankrupt. So it's like on every level we bottomed out, spiritually, emotionally, financially, lost everything. And I was given a council flat. I was on benefits and raising the 4 children. And out of desperation and just a longing to be really seen and witnessed, I found a Relate counsellor. I remember her name because it was such an important meeting for me. And what she pointed out to me was that he hasn't caused the suffering. He's took the lid off of what was already there, which was quite a revelation and quite a bitter pill to swallow, because it meant that I had to take responsibility for my feelings, and I didn't know how. I didn't know what to do. So towards the end of our meetings with Sheila, she suggested or saw something in me that she felt might kind of be useful, and she said to me, have you considered this type of work and holding space? Because she felt that a natural affinity, empathy, I don't know. And I hadn't, but it planted a seed. So kind of once I moved through this process, not very effectively still, I was still flaying about and projecting stuff out and blaming the world and its wife for what I was feeling. I enrolled on a 8-week course of counselling and psychotherapy, and it wasn't to become anything, it was just to have a space and a container. I didn't know this at the time, but I was searching. And I walked into the college and there was a woman that I looked at her and she shook my world. And I'm going to get emotional at this point because she's no longer with us. She left her body a couple of years ago, and last year, was it there? Yeah. But she was a really pivotal woman in my life. And there was something that she had that I wanted. And it wasn't about the academic, anything like that. But I looked at her and felt a resonance. And that was a doorway for me. And through her, and I went on, I did the year course, I went on and did the 3 years course, still not really wanting to become anything, but just wanting to be in a space that was different to a space that I'd been experiencing in my everyday life, where I could be honest, where I could be seen and heard, and where people could really understand what I was feeling. So I went through the motions.
What were you feeling?
What I was feeling was a deep, deep vulnerability. And what I come to see was that what my husband had done had taken the lid off of my own abandonment and betrayal issues. I'd got left by my mum when I was 4 or 5, I'm not sure. And I just put a lid on that. It was like it was no big deal. She wasn't around and that was that. But underneath there was a real deep wounding. And a shock of things being a certain way and then completely changing. So I was left with my older brother, he was a year older than me, and my dad, and we went to live with my nan, so we changed schools and everything just turned around. And what I don't remember having was a nurturing feminine around.
Okay.
I don't remember having a strong enough woman to just be with me and support me as a little girl. So kind of in all of that, what I'd noticed in the way that I'd lived my life was I'd also checked out. I wasn't in.
So would I be correct in saying you grew up without ever allowing yourself to feel vulnerable, and then that kind of hit you
Absolutely.
with this experience?
Totally.
Because I can relate to that, and we'll talk about my experience later. And I think this is something that's fascinating because it comes up more and more that we're growing up in environments where we're not allowed to feel vulnerable, because the thing that comes up for me more and more with the work that I do and the people that I meet is it's not okay to not be okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we can get to the point where it is absolutely okay to not be okay, and to be able to sit with that and work through it in a way rather than just burying it or just pretending like it's not happening. Because otherwise you get to the point where you're married, you've got 4 kids, and all of a sudden you've got all this lifelong worth of pain and grief and frustration and resentment that's been bottled up.
Yeah.
And then when you do allow yourself to be vulnerable and face it, it can literally turn your life upside down.
It did. And I didn't even have the language for vulnerability. I didn't even know that word existed. And I remember a very wise woman saying to me, because I am a strong woman, I've always been a strong woman, but she said to me, she said, Gina, strength without vulnerability is brittle. And I never quite understood what she was saying, but I get it now. Totally get it. And what I've come to see is that the vulnerability in itself is the biggest strength. Totally.
And for the people that are listening or watching this, if any of you are watching us on YouTube, not everybody really understands what vulnerability is, and I had to battle with that for many years to really understand what vulnerability was, because for me, as a bloke, it represented weakness and not being good enough and not being strong enough, and I've absolutely turn that on its head and fully understand that how much strength can be derived from vulnerability. But from your perspective as an expert in this field, how would you describe vulnerability to someone that hasn't really got a concept of what that means?
It's being willing to show up without the defences. It's being willing to be however you are in that moment. And it doesn't always mean a crumbling wreck. It means to be, for me, it means to be receptive, available. Even in this moment, there's a vulnerability in me. Because I'm talking about personal stuff, my heart's open. There's a connection here. There's an intimacy here. So for me, that creates vulnerability.
And what I find fascinating in terms of sort of being on the receiving end of your vulnerability is I feel safe, I feel empathetic, and it's also given me permission to want to go there myself, if that makes sense. Because often when you've got someone that is not showing up authentically in the truth of who they are, then you've also at some level got your defences and your barriers up.
Absolutely. And it's an invitation to show your vulnerability or to show yourself, let's say, because for me there's no separateness. If I'm showing myself totally, there's a vulnerability there.
Absolutely.
And an openness, because I'm just here. I'm not defending, I'm not,
Not wearing a mask, not trying to pretend it's someone you're not trying to put on an act. It's like just being totally with whatever's internally what's happening.
And I know we've all done this at times where you do put on the act, you do put on the mask because you're scared of showing up in the truth of who you are because you yourself aren't comfortable with it. So a big part of this process for me is actually getting comfortable in your own skin, in the truth of who you are, rather than trying to be someone that you're not or trying to fit in or fit up to the image that people have built of you. And I've struggled with that for many years. You get stuck in that ego space. People see, oh, you're this, you're that, and you're other, and you're on TV and you write books, and like I'm trying to fill the boots that I've created for myself, and it's a load of bullshit. It's just an illusion. And actually, I found that I'm way more powerful and way more able to facilitate change and be able to make a difference when I'm authentic, rather than when I'm trying to be the person people expect me to be.
And it's like we resonate with that authenticity without words. So it's like that something happens, it's like people know that they can trust me, and that's a lot of what happens at our work, is people, they get it as soon as they walk in and they sit in circle with us. The body knows. It's
Absolutely.
like, and I can be authentic here because it's going to be accepted, and we don't put on an image, we don't, that's just not, we are ourselves, even in our work. It's like that brings a beauty to it that allows people to be themselves.
So going back, you're at this place where you're finally facing up to your vulnerability.
So picking up on that part where I left, what I noticed is that I'd checked out. I wasn't in. There wasn't a present feminine, available energy inside of me. I'd disowned that.
And also, I'm going to pick up on things that some of our viewers and listeners may not understand. So when you say the present feminine, please help our viewers and listeners to understand.
For me, it's an internal availability to meet what's happening inside. So to be with myself emotionally and not run or turn from anything that's showing up that I don't like, i.e. vulnerability, rage, disappointment, whatever's showing up in me. So the feminine presence can now meet that fully. I'm not afraid. I don't have to turn away from that. But my deepest wounding was I didn't have that externally. And what I noticed is I didn't have that internally, because I've been living in my mind. I've detached from my inner resources, my inner guidance.
So again, just so I've understood this correctly, so being in the mind, being up here in your head, would you say is more of a masculine trait, and being connected with feelings and emotion is more feminine?
Yeah, I mean, to put it in that, the masculine is the kind of, the way I see it, is the driving force. It's the action orientated, and the feminine is the receptive, surrendered, I'm here. And
this is gender neutral. This is more the energy you're coming from rather than the gender you happen to be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So when I noticed that I was recreating my deepest wound by not being present and not being available, it was only then that I could start to show up for myself. And that kind of gave me permission to stop looking outside. It's like, if I can't do it here, I'm expecting my friends, my loved ones, my husband to provide something that I wasn't able to do myself. So, and it was it was a kick in the teeth, really, because I just wanted someone to give it to me. I didn't want to have to do this work.
Wouldn't that be easy? Someone give you a pill and you swallow
Exactly.
it. Job done.
Just make me better, fix me, take this away. It's too difficult. So that was. I actually took 4 or 5 days out. I'd never left my children because of my wounding. I didn't know this either. But I actually took time out and went away on my own to really ground that. And it was an inner. It wasn't I'm going to go and do this it was an inner call to really be with myself. So that was the breakthrough. It was like my story was she left me, and then the realisation was I'd left me. So it was my responsibility to walk myself back home, really.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like a pretty compelling experience that obviously seriously adjusted the course of your life.
It did. It was a belly up. It was a total U-turn on how I'd been viewing life and my perception on life, and that people was there to serve me actually and fix me and make me better and give me stuff. And none of that worked. None of that fixed me.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you for being vulnerable and authentic with it. So Debbie, what was your life-changing experience? What kind of
there
led
have
you
been
to
a
the path?
few, but but I guess the crux of it, if I think back to the first one was, or the first, I guess, major area was, I married 3 children, very successful, used to work in the corporate world, and found myself getting divorced from my husband at the time, and had 3 young children under 8. And of course I was doing the thing in life where it's like, I'm okay, I've got life covered, and yeah, nothing's going to rock me. That's how the external picture, so I was still working full time, caring for my children at home on my own. And life pretty much seemed like it hadn't changed. Yet physically what happened was I got really bad acne. Now this is when I was about 28, 29. And physically I was just coming up in these like really big boils on my face. And I went to see my doctor and she said, has anything happened? Are you stressed? And I said, no, life's normal. It's like I laugh about it now, but at the time I was so serious. It's like I honestly thought that I was doing okay. And I started to think about, like, I saw an advert in our local Waltham Forest Gazette or whatever it was called for adult education, and there was a question this woman was asking. Have you ever asked yourself, the question is this what life is all about? And I just went, my God, that is my question. It's like, surely this cannot be what I'm meant to do, be working like a Trojan and not really having any joy. And so I signed up for this 8-week adult education course, and it was about feelings. Now I didn't really know what a feeling was, and what I've come to see is that is that when we got divorced and my husband left, and he also betrayed me in that as well, there was a betrayal within our marriage, is that he effectively, as Gina just said, what happened between her and husband was he took the lid off of my childhood. In my childhood, my mum and dad had got divorced. Interestingly enough, when I was about 7 or 8, that was the age of my eldest daughter at the time. So my mum also had 3 children, and she found herself on her own, and we literally, what happened back then is moved out of the home that we lived in literally overnight. So I lost my dad, and I was the daddy's girl. I was the oldest, and I had 2 younger brothers. And it's like, so I'd lost my world really. I lost my dad, I changed schools, I used to be really active, lots of clubs I used to go to, gymnastics, dancing, they were all in my neighbourhood. So it was literally overnight I just lost all of that, and started in a new school, and I was petrified. I mean, I know this now, but I'd literally closed myself down, and I was doing exactly the same with the divorce. Literally closed myself down to just contain what was really going on underneath the surface. I didn't really know what emotions were. I mean, my mum was sent into her own grief with the divorce from my dad, and she'd been an abandoned child, so she'd been fostered, she didn't have parents, so she was stuck straight back into her trauma. So I literally had nobody. Overnight I'd lost my dad, who I think was emotionally present, but then my mum, and probably my mum was too, I don't know, I don't remember. It's interesting how I don't remember my childhood. Anybody relate to that?
Oh, totally. I put my hand up to that for sure.
Exactly. It's like those things that have caused us the most pain, we just don't remember, we
Totally.
can't remember. And so that really started me on a train then of doing lots and lots of personal development work, because I realised the missing piece was around, for me, the emotional world, which for me is the realm of the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, although my mum and my dad wasn't around either as we grew up, but it was like I didn't have, my mum gave the masculine holding because my mum went out and worked and she earned money and she enabled us to have a roof over our head and food on the table, but the feminine emotional holding was not there. It's like, and for me that's a key part of the feminine, is this emotional holding. So consequently I didn't know what it was. So a bit like as Gina said, it was like a re-education for myself of how can I hold myself emotionally, and where did the depths of where I needed to go back to my childhood trauma, my childhood wounding, to even begin then to heal what was happening currently in my life. You know, and I do see it as the biggest gift, because I had 3 children and I do not want to pass on what my experience was to my children. So I feel like me being able to come to terms with that myself has enabled me to give my children a different experience. I think my eldest maybe suffered some of the ways that I did, because I was absent at the beginning because I needed to resource myself. I just wasn't resourced.
It's the whole analogy when you get on a plane before the plane takes off and go to straight safety instructions for dropping cabin pressure. Before you attempt to put the mask on a child or an old person or an injured person, you've got to put it on yourself. But you know, particularly because we're British, you know, we're always like, you know, let's help everybody else, and so it's fine, you go ahead, without actually putting our own needs first. And it's something that's fascinating, which I think you guys will relate to. That whole, the whole phrase, it's better to give than to receive. I only very recently learned that wasn't the original phrase. It came from a Greek proverb. The original phrase was, it's better to be in a position to give than to need to receive. Guess who changed it? The church. And why did they change it? Because they're handing out the basket, it's better to give than to receive. But the true philosophy is very different to what it was changed to. And I find that fascinating, because we've got this culture now where it's like, it's all about everybody else, and it's selfish to think of myself first and put my needs first. But until you do, how can you help anybody else? And it sounds like both of you had gone through that journey where you had to get to a point where you had to put your needs first. And having been there myself, it's not easy to take that step, but when you do, it's when it starts to make sense.
Definitely, yeah. And it led me, because I was working in the corporate world, I was working in a very masculine world. I was one of a few women amongst the team that I worked as part of. So really being in that goal-orientated, driven place all around money and around finances. And it also, my journey, because I retrained, it was, it's like, what is my heart calling for? It's like, that was what I came back to, rather than following the traditional story in a way that we're led to believe, that you grow up, you get married, you have children, this sort of romantic view that we have of the world now, or of life. It's like I began to see that wasn't actually, that didn't meet me. It was like somewhere I was not fulfilled, and it was like, what is going to fulfill me? And I realised I needed to move out of the job that I was doing, because it just didn't speak to my heart. And so I retrained as a counsellor, and that was where I really sort of found the work that we do now. And part of that for me was, I just saw a woman across a room that I was at some event, and I just knew there was just this inner calling to connect with her. And I went over to her and I said, I don't know why, but I know I need to speak to you. And she gave me a card for Celebration of Woman, the Goddess. And that was really the piece that, because there is our emotional world, and there's being able to hold and be present with that, but it's to be embodied in that, to be able to really feel it in our bodies and be connected to this human experience that we have. Because it's like, quite often we'll have as you talked about, the mind and that cognitive sense of something, but actually what does it feel like in our body? And that's the human experience for me. It's like, I don't live in my mind, although I lived in my mind for a long time, but really the beauty is to actually really experience this life that we have. We get a life here, and to really experience that in our bodies, and experience the joy and the heartbreak. And the rhythm of life, I don't think it's meant to be like this. I think it's meant to be like this. It's like an acknowledgement of what is, and to be totally present and experienced and embodied with that.
And absolutely, one of the guests that we've got coming onto the podcast very soon, a gentleman called Dr. Steve Peters, wrote a book called The Chin Paradox, and how we get stuck in that monkey mind where, you know, the word that comes to mind is you're in that kind of head fuck space where your brain is screaming at you and it's just very reactive and responding to external stimulus, but we're not actually ever taking the time to be present in the moment. And for me, in my experience, most of the stress and negative sort of challenges and concerns and worries that we have aren't happening right now. They're either happening in the future because we're worried about things that have never happened, you know, or haven't yet happened. Mahatma Gandhi said 90% of things we worry about never actually take place. Or things that have already happened and we're going over them in our mind and we're stewing about past events. Unless you're being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger or there's some, you know, major challenge in the moment, very little of what's happening right now is negatively going to affect us. So you know, again, all of that's mind stuff. It's all head fuck stuff. Because actually, when you can drop down into your body and be present with where we are right now, actually, most of us are okay.
Yeah. Yes. And the moment's okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, and when we drop, it's like we often talk about the journey being from the head to the heart. And the emotional world, it's like bringing the emotions and the head together and meeting in that heart space that brings love, compassion, and realness, authenticity to the moment. It's like, not in the past, present.
Now, this is a nice little segue onto the next thing I really want to talk to you about, which is your work. Is number one, what led you to your work, but also, you know, a lot of the kind of the things that you describe and kind of the language and the approaches that you shared little of so far. I think one of the challenges is going to be that, you know, that there's probably a lot of blokes out there thinking about, you know, the words and language you're using. I think, you know, what's all that nonsense kind of thing? Because as blokes, we're trained from a very early age. Is, you know, pull your socks up and get on with it. Yeah. I watched my dad bury his parents and two of his sisters and not shed a tear. And his strapline in life is life goes on, just get on with it, kind of thing. You know, they just never let himself be emotionally affected. In fact, the only time I thought I ever saw him ever express any emotions in the stand of a football stadium, where he could scream and shout or shed a tear and it would be okay. But everywhere else, he was just like, just get on with it. He was a strong man. And I guess I always tried to emulate that because my dad was he was a good guy and he was always kind of, you know, doing as much as he could to make a difference in the world. But the reality is that, you know, underneath all of that, there was a really emotionally sensitive man that never really allowed himself to express that.
It's sad, isn't it? It's really sad. And we see that, you know, again, and we see the projections that are made on men that you don't feel, you're not sensitive, you don't know what it's like to be a woman. And we see it time and time again, the men that come and sit in a circle with us, they are as sensitive as we are. Absolutely. They feel in the same way that we do. And, you know, it's like, and men know this and they're not allowed to show that, and I just find that really sad. It's like, and that's the distortion that we have now, is because, you know, for me there is a need for us to become an emotionally balanced world. And that for me is you might want to call it a feminine principle, to be more in your emotions. And I think there can be fear because girls on the other hand are told to be emotional. You know, so then therefore you have you can have women that do have access to their emotions, but it's floundering because there's nothing to hold it.
Well, something that concerns me more is I'm seeing a lot of young girls told to put a lid on their emotion because you're in a man's world and you need to man up, and that is really scary for me. And I'm seeing a lot more, particularly in the corporate work we do, of experiences where you are dealing with a woman in a man's body. Sorry, a man in a woman's body. You know, where they've spent so long operating from a masculine state, they've forgotten they've forgotten what it is to be in the divine feminine, which is actually way more powerful. You know, I kind of knew that theoretically, but you guys showed me that firsthand of how much more power a woman has when she's standing in her true essence, and how also that gives permission for a bloke to be able to stand in his true essence without there being that distortion. But like, what I really want to sort of get to is how you got to this work, because you obviously mentioned you met this lady across the room and you went over to have a chat with her. So I just want to get a sense from you, you know, got your backstory. So what got you to do the work you do? How did you end up, you know, with Celebration of Being? Before we get to actually what the work is, how did you end up?
You did it first, didn't you?
So I said I had a pivotal moment with a woman in college. Her name was Shanti, and I bless her heart and her name. And through her, I journeyed to India and just started my own spiritual exploration. And through that I got a connection with a place in the UK where I met an outstanding woman. And she was doing a course, and I just felt this woman's presence. I felt her strength, I felt her energy, and she said, I'm doing a course next week, blah, 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 why don't you come? And I did. And I didn't know what I was going for, I didn't know what it was about, I didn't care really, it was just, the next thing to do. And I just met a depth of presence and holding that I'd never experienced. And I was a bit cynical first time around. I was a bit of a hard nut to crack, and I was judgmental and still in my head. So I retook this course again with the founder of the work. I did it with Raja Markman, and there was something about the look in her eyes and the quality of tenderness that she brought that cracked my heart open. I couldn't name it, but it was like something that I've been looking for my whole life. It was just a gaze. It was I see you, I'm here. It was really simple. And the net was really sewn for me. The cast was, it was done. There was a surrender. And I didn't know it happened. It was internal. And I did that group. I went along and did the next group. That's where I met Debbie. But Rajo started to get sick, and she needed somebody to take care of the work in the UK. And a friend of ours, Dana Edwards, she put her hand up and she started this process of holding space and getting the work going over in the UK. And then another group, they wanted somebody to take the mixed work. Well, they wanted us to go to America to do the mixed work, the next stage. And Debbie just asked, why is it not happening here? And she said, well, there's nobody that wants to hold space, so her hand went up.
So me and my leadership style just went, well, I'm going to make that happen.
So that's what happened. And we started to support Dana, the work, then Debbie and Stella, friend of Debbie's, a friend of ours. They put their hand up for the mixed work, and we was just working alongside, going as staff, supporting and just going for our own process. And it that was the entry point for us. So do you want to take over there when you came in and how?
Yeah, because Gina's daughter was actually at the group that I did when I did Goddess, and for me it was, I saw that woman and she gave me the card, and it really just filled that missing piece of the jigsaw for me, because I'd done quite a lot of personal development work up until that point with particular organisations, and what I got to see was the embodiment piece for me, and Rajo, what it allowed me to do was, it's like enter the mystery of the feminine, because I think we were talking about the linear aspect that comes from the masculine. It's much more linear. I do A, B, C, D, E, and the feminine is not that. The feminine is mysterious in the way that she moves, in the way, and for me, that what was allowed at that first workshop for me was to drop into the emotions and trust something that knew better than I did. It was like something took me on that first weekend that I did. There's an initiation process to our work, and it was like, and I was initiated into something that I couldn't understand. My cognitive mind was like, what happened? And I did not know, and I was in a daze for a while afterwards. And signed up to do the second level of the work, which is what we did. And as Gina said, I was just really passionate. I knew, when you get that feeling inside yourself where you just know something's for you, which was the mixed group work. I knew without a shadow of a doubt I needed that for my own healing journey. And it's like, and I knew that I didn't want to fly to another country. I didn't want to do it with men that didn't grow up in the same culture as me. And so it was just, for me, there was just this, I guess there was something in me that knew that was my pathway. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that I needed the work, and I was going to do what needed to happen for that to come into existence in the UK.
And may I ask, was it very much more a sense of the path chose you rather than you chose the path?
Definitely.
Because I very much feel like that.
I had no idea why I was doing this and why I asked the question that I did, or, you know, it's like literally, and that, you know, for me, and never did I ever imagine we'd be sitting at the front of the circle as we do now, and, you know, guiding the groups, and, you know, that was never in my awareness. I think, you know, there was one time I was coming back and questioning, could I carry on doing what we were doing? Because it took a lot in the early days when I think back. It's like our journey. We were trying to remember, it's like 12 to 15 years ago since we first got involved. And it's like that journey has been challenging, particularly in those early days, you know, how to get a group together and to get people to come into a space for men led by women. That was quite challenging, you know, and to find men that were willing to be pioneers in that way. It's like, you know, you hear many spiritual teachers now and wise people talking about the fact that the feminine is what is needed to change the world. That wasn't happening 12 to 15 years ago. And, you know, so it's been quite a long haul for us, but one that we wouldn't change. But I remember questioning, why am I doing this? Why am I, you know, exhausting myself in a way to make these workshops happen? And this was before we were facilitating, this was in the early days, and just this voice said to me, it's because you're meant to sit at the front of that circle. And I cracked up, I just burst into tears. It was like, you're joking me. It was like, I could never really imagine it. But, you know, it's that thing of you saying being guided by something that's much more than we are.
I love having these conversations because everybody that I speak to that is on this kind of a path, that's had this kind of a journey, you know, the context of the story is exactly the same. The content may change, but something beyond yourself, something that you can't understand or explain, has compelled you down this path. It's exactly the same for me. I didn't choose to be here. This path chose me. You know, if you asked me like 15 years ago what you could be doing in 15 years, I would have not even had this on my radar. It was only because I had a series of experiences and events that then compelled me to start taking steps into areas that I didn't even understand or comprehend. I had no experience or no qualifications or no education or no expertise to be able to tread in. And I think it's, you know, it's very much a case for me that I believe that when you're treading that path that leads to your destiny, the universe conspires to help you, because things happen you can't even explain. So obviously that's incredible that you were compelled. Like for me, like you described, I can't remember the exact language you used to describe it, like a kick in the teeth, I think is the words you used. For me, I describe it as a baseball bat around the head. Like, you know, when I'm on the path of not serving, it's something that happens, of course, correct. And it's not a nice little gentle prod, it's like a bitch slap. And it's those that, you know, when it happens, I used to be like, oh, what the hell's going on here? I've now come to appreciate that there will be some value from this experience, and you know, like I've had probably the most interesting year of my life this year, but it's now starting to become apparent why I've had to go through that, and that's again, like, you know, the whole purpose of this work that we're doing with Life Changing Conversations is getting people to understand those life changing moments, those challenging moments. There's such tremendous value in them. So obviously that brought you to this work. What is your work? What is it you do? And I appreciate there's elements of your processes and your programs that are best saved for the weekend. But overall, if somebody asked you, so what is it that you guys do? What is your process about? You know, what is it that people can expect, or what is it they'll be working on? What would you say to that? Because I obviously will share my experience of it, and that's the one thing I want really people to really get an insight into.
For me, it's an unravelling of everything we're not.
Okay.
It's a taking off the mask and seeing ourselves clearly. It's and in my own experience, I didn't even know I was wearing a mask. It was so fixed. It was, you know, so part of me that and like you say, it was the kick in the teeth. I wouldn't have listened to a gentle prod. It had to be a complete and utter breakdown. And that kind of the cracks started to show in that. And what I see in our work is that it's, for me, it's a meeting. It's a true meeting, heart to heart, belly to belly. It's really raw and primal. It's deep. It's pivotal in